Hey guys, how's it going? It's Kai here with another Exos Heroes video, and in today's video I want to talk about this matchup tier list for all the nations here, done by, I believe, Psyche, S-I-K-Y. Really good information, also really well put together, so I want to go over it, kind of go over my opinion on it. I think this is going to be really helpful for a lot of people to understand their team and how to approach each matchup going into it, and then also understand what potential other options you can put on your team based on which one you invested into, because for most people, they really only have one nation that they're really heavily invested into. So then this is going to really break down all of your options and also all of your matchups so you know what to do, and at least you have a good game plan so you can really help evaluate what you need to do, make sure you're winning more matches. He starts it off, all of these are based on nation and then all the potential characters you can put on each nation here. So I think it's really well thought out, really well put together here. So the first thing is going to be the Greenland faction. He has them all, like the characters in a certain tier list, and then also the matchups here. So the first thing I want to talk about is the actual characters of the Greenland faction, like which ones you should focus on. A lot of this is just really good information I completely agree with. And a lot of it is he's definitely putting a lot of effort into each matchup, so he knows a lot more than I do when it comes to these specific matchups. So that's another reason why I want to just defer to this list instead of me going through this all, because there's definitely a lot more experience here when it comes to each PvP matchup. So the first thing, obviously, Bathory and Rare are going to be the main units, and then FC Tontolo protects key units. FC Tontolo, obviously a really amazing character for this, and then FC Talia is also S tier when it comes to this too, because really good versus heavy burst teams, usually interchangeable with Rams to fight against. FC Tontolo is a really good choice, so he's saying good versus heavy burst teams, usually interchangeable with Rams to fight against heavy assault teams. I personally do the Rams route because I just have such a hard time actually breaking through that I really like to have Rams, and I've fully invested in him. Eventually, I'll be able to go back and then get enough ultimate orbs in Talia and really see the difference. But at the moment, I really just want to make sure I'm actually ending these matches, because I think with Talia, the matches become this massive stall fest, and the odds of it going constantly to overtime is really high. Iris enables Bathory and Rare to AoE without a care in the world. I've always had Iris on the team, and I really noticed it because I've been playing on another account, and they're really invested into Northern Frosty, and you really start to appreciate Iris only when she's not on the team. You can get away with so many AoEs when you have Iris on the team. If you don't, you have to be so careful on making sure your dot effects don't pop off on the wrong characters. AoE effects potentially could be an issue if they're not strong enough to actually do serious damage and break through the first Guardian shields. So you really want to be careful if you don't have Iris on how you play your matchups, because you can really screw yourself because of the first Guardian passive. And then, yeah, as you were saying with Rams here, good versus heavy stall teams, interchange with Talia if you want more stability instead. So me personally, I face so many more Greenland teams than I face any other faction, so I prefer to have Rams to really punch through those teams, especially as the Greenland team. I don't really have an issue with survivability, only because I have Tontolo. If I didn't have Tontolo, then you might want to reconsider and put Talia and Rams in there to be able to fight against solid teams and also actually be able to survive. Tontolo lets you get away with a lot of stuff. And then FCE Illum. Me personally, I've been appreciating Illum, especially in tag team days, but let's see what he says about him. So this is if you get rid of Tontolo, still a very powerful self-healing tank, leaves room to use Tontolo in other teams. If other teams don't need him, you can actually put Illum, Tontolo, and Talia together to make an extremely annoying team. I think that's a really cool team comp, especially for tag team. It'd be a pretty annoying team to go against as that third team. I think it'd be really easy to underestimate when you're looking at all three teams that the enemy is using. And then you put in probably, I can see people putting in their worst team and then still losing and being like, wow, the team's actually pretty good. Then we got FC Garf, which is, so me personally, I've never even really considered using FC Garf. When it comes to FC Garf, usually I only like him purely in the Wasted Red team. Whenever I go against a Garf, unless it's on a really well-built Wasted Red team, I just feel like she just sits there and it is a stat boost. And the other characters I have to think about so much harder. Like I have to worry about Talia, Tontolo, and even Rams significantly more than Garf, whereas Garf is just boosting stats. So then taking advantage of multiple buffs to stall out opponents regardless of presence of first Guardian versus non-Iris team, or good versus non-Iris team. So he was saying like combination of Garf and Rudely. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to splash in, and you would minus out Iris and then you put in both of those guys. So I think that's a pretty interesting tech there. I've been seeing a lot of these kind of pseudo teams going on. If you look at the top, I like to look at the top people in PvP and see what they're kind of doing and seeing the team comps, and I'm seeing a lot of like Greenland teams. So it'd be like the three main characters of a Greenland team, and then they'll splash in April and Raquel, or they'll splash in Shufrakin and Valentina. And then I can see this too with Garf and Rudley. If you really want to go full on survivability, you're just super annoying with like Bathory, Herrera, Tantalo, and then Garf and Rudley. It'd be kind of a funny team to run. And then here he was also saying here, this FC, Janai, and Shell, this is kind of that same concept. You can essentially do this with every major duo. You put them in the team of the primary units of Greenland, and then you splash in 2 characters from another faction. And he's saying worst case scenario is to clear shield situationally, does synergize with Tantalo, but lacks healing if you use them together. So it's kind of another way to do it. I'm just seeing the other ones. I really like the Shufrakin and Valentina combo with this team. I'm seeing people at the top, and I've been trying to run that myself, and I think it's actually really good because you get Bathory to clear out all of the passives. Like Bathory goes first before the Valentina. She clears out all of the summer passives by Iris, and then Valentina goes in and just completely wrecks them and drains all their mana. Also gives a really good survivability too because you have Tranquil. Okay, so that is the Greenland team here. I think, again, this is just a really good visualization of the potential character choices, and then matchup wise, in Greenland mirror match, pretty much the first person to lose Iris usually loses. Binding the enemy rare, if yours is faster, usually helps slow down the damage. That's been my biggest priority when playing this matchup, because what I noticed is I ended up putting, when I unleashed potentialed Herrera, I ended up getting her A1 maxed last, and I didn't really appreciate just how much a single target bind would make a difference. And so I didn't really know who to hit. But then once you get that unleashed potential on her A1, it's pretty clear that if you're first, you binding their Rara is by far the biggest change. And I notice when their enemy Rara goes first and then randomly chooses, because it's 1 out of 5, the AI doesn't have a preset target. If they hit my Rara and bind my Rara, that is by far the biggest impact on the match that you can possibly have. So some of those first matchups really matter. So I think when it comes to magic enhancement, you really want to make sure you're prioritizing your Rara and getting as much speed on there as possible. Like I've complained in that RAM video that magic enhancement is a garbage thing. How I like to do my magic enhancement is I take a gear piece and then I'll roll it a couple times, and the second it hits something that's actually usable, whether it be block percentage, crit rate, something that is actually good, I just stop rolling it, and then I'm going to put it on a character that actually uses those stats. But ideally it's going to be speed. So eventually you're going to run through a ton of rank 1 gear, but you're going to need to level up at least 5 teams worth of characters, or you're going to need at least roll 3 teams worth of characters. So that's 15 characters. So you still have a lot of potential to roll them. It's going to take a long time to get to that point, but I'm not going to sit there and just force a piece of gear to actually be good. I'm just going to roll them a few times. Okay, this one rolled speed. Awesome. Oh, this one rolled crit damage. That's still good. Crit rate. That's still good. Like there's a lot. I'll probably make it my own video separate to this talking about that. But I think that's a really good way to make sure you're getting good magic enhancements. And then especially for this, making sure you have enough speed is really going to be super impactful for your matchups against a mirror match. So, and then versus Northfront Frosty, usually fighting against Val teams is like fighting against a ticking time bomb. If you get mana burn, it's pretty hard to recover and win. And then priority targets are going to be Iris and Valentina. I think that's a pretty standard matchup. I think most people understand just how big of a deal Valentina is, and making sure you get her out of here is going to be by far the most important thing. I think you just hope you crit as many times as possible, and then it's really up to how much investment they have in their Valentina and how much investment you have on your damage dealers to determine that matchup. And then Wasted Red, this can be tricky depending on how much damage you do and how tanky their units are. If you can't kill one unit and Ridley can S2, you're risking losing in sudden death priority targets, Ramj, Iris, and Ridley. Me versus Wasted Red, usually I feel like the match really depends on how quickly I can get rid of their Annie. And if I can kill their Annie quick, then I can really start to focus on their Rudely and potentially win the match. So that hopefully that's going to be another one where it just really comes to how much damage output you can get out there. And I think it potentially a hard matchup. I think the versions of the ones where they don't have Annie on there, I think are way easier. But at the same time, it's one of those matchups where it really just comes down to you can only optimize how you play the matchup so much, and it really comes down to how much investment you have on each of your characters. And then lastly, I think, yeah, I agree with this guy. Pretty easy fight. Prioritize binding Baraka if he's next, so he can't plunder mana from the back row. I think that's a really good tip. I usually this matchup's easy, so I haven't really min-maxed it when it comes to this, and then delete Xeon so he doesn't go crazy. I think that's just really good advice when it comes to matching up against this team. But as a Greenland player, I haven't had too much of an issue facing that team anyway, so I haven't really, I was kind of wondering what the most optimal play is. Like, I'll look at their back row and I'm like, oh, should I hit Rachel? Should I hit? And then it's like, okay, that makes sense that rare is going to go for Baraka, and then you just make sure you stomp the Baraka so he can't plunder and take mana from one of your characters, because these plunder mechanics or bind mechanics are so much more impactful in the beginning of the game than they are later on, because people haven't even gained their mana yet. Okay, so I think that's going to cover Greenland.